Hi everyone. My name is Abbie, and I am a senior security advisor. I've been working in the healthcare and security industry for some time now, and I'm also a co-founder of the Accountable Digital Identity Association. And today we'll be talking about a journey toward passwordless authentication in healthcare. And actually, it will work whether it is healthcare or not, any large enterprise or consumer-facing enterprise or a service. End of the day, passwords are problematic, and a lot of the consumers and the industry are realizing that we got us a problem with passwords and we need to attack that problem. So legacy authentication has a password problem. At the beginning, when passwords were created, they solved a particular need, which is how can you prove yourself when you want to access an account. And for some time, they were okay because the number of accounts were limited and the ability of people to access those accounts were limited. As the internet grew, passwords became a problem. And typical users have a lot of accounts to deal with and a lot of accounts to interact with. And a lot of those accounts require unique passwords for security. However, this is easier said than done. So at some point, the industry started looking, how can we improve on the security of passwords? And to do that, they had password rules, password complexity rules, the size of the password, and so forth. End of the day, this was stopgap measures and did not solve the main security issue with passwords. Passwords are shared secrets. Shared secrets can be stolen, leaked, copied, used, shared, and as such, passwords are a security risk. They should not be relied upon if you really need to secure your accounts and your users. So, the industry realized that we got us a problem with passwords and we need to solve it. The question is, how can we go around about that? How can we eliminate the reliance on passwords, but also do it in a way that we're improving security without introducing a lot of lack of comfort, friction to the end users. And this is very important. If you are trying to interact with a relying party and you want to do business, you want to be able to do your job, the passwords and the security components should help you to interact with that business, but as opposed to be the friction and making you go away and go somewhere else because the security is too impactful on the user. So this is the balance, security and usability, and it has always been the case. The advent of mobile devices did not make the reliance on the passwords less cumbersome. Actually, it made them more cumbersome because on small screen, small device, entering password is harder. So, password managers will help, but still, again, it is the act of supplying a password per site, per location as we go. It has a problem and it's the usability factor is not too good. So today, going forward, the concept for an enterprise, the journey to help that enterprise to have better consumer experience and offer stronger authentication, it's becoming much more realistic and much more achievable. So as we could see, we started with username, password, then we added multi-factor authentication. The idea here is there are different authentication categories. We can pick and choose one of different category, something you know, something you are, and something you have. And sometimes with behavior, something that you do or you act. And we could do that and use one factor from each category to enhance the confidence that the caller on the other end is the claimed caller. So these are part of what's available today. Also, risk engine that we could be used to bind the user to a device or behavior to make sure that we are dealing with the same entity. And then the beginning of a usable PKI technology. And this was happened when the FIDO Alliance started in 2015 and started relying on the making PKI usable. And what enabled that is the evolution of mobile devices, where a mobile device had enough computing horsepower and usability in terms of secure enclave and the ability to process biometric to enable a local biometric authentication on the device, and then piggybacked on a PKI to make sure that the authentication is replaced from being a shared secret to basically PKI, certificate-based authentications. All of this is fine and dandy. Part of the overall solution to get out of the reliance on authentication is how you can also get the users to access back again and account recovery in case if their phone or main access device is stolen, lost, upgraded, and other stuff. So voice authentication starts playing good support. So call centers with false biometric help bind the user back to their identity. And if it's done correctly, it can ease into the task of providing the user a proper account recovery. However, voice and call support is expensive, and a lot of the time reaching the call center, it means a lot of expense has been done, and in some cases the user will be not convenient. So it's a trade-off. It's an option that's available, but it's also a trade-off. But the evolution started and kept going with the FIDO WebAuthn, and in that technology, it's browser-based, so we were finally able to offer on the laptop and the PC what the mobile phone was able to do through proper APIs that are done at the browser level to enable a usable PKI from the PC. Not all PCs are suitable for WebAuthn because they don't have the proper secure enclaves. And FIDO, with its work, did the CTAP protocol. So basically, you could rely on a platform that can hide and secure the keys while interacting with the PC. And there is a communication between an external FIDO supporting agent and the laptop. So enterprises also, in order to get rid of the reliance on password, they can use proper device management, basically manage devices. We can have a proper idea of what's on the device, how secure the device is, the hygiene of the device, and it can be used in risk engine management to fingerprint the device and the binding between the user and device for the authentication interaction or transaction. And so this solves one of the main issues, but the main problem that we still have so far is the single user device or single laptop or single browser and a credential for a user. So it is per device, and the account recovery, it becomes harder because if your trust anchor has been lost or changed. So FIDO is moving now into multi-device credential solution, where if with the platform providers, if you have a mobile device and you upgrade to another mobile device, you can get portability of the FIDO credential for that specific relying party. So at least you can get an extra degree of confidence that the same user was on the previous device and the new device has been ported and some authentication happened before the user was allowed to come to this new device. So we are having now, an array of options that enable us to do better security and help us on the journey to eliminate passwords altogether. So the sticky point still the online enrollment, meaning that we can do all the strong authentication, but before if your business model require proper KYC and know your customer, so the online enrollment will require a proper identity vetting. And this is, we still don't have a magic bullet to solve that. There are some emerging solutions that work on decentralization, and, it's being standardized and taking off. But for now, still the online enrollment, it's the one of the weakest links, which cover back with account recovery. You know, if you lose all of your credentials and your phone and you want to come back, basically you need to re-enroll. And you need to do that per FIDO transaction for or device for a given user. And this is, you know, problematic. And with all of the solutions, sometimes the basic foundational flow still rely on a password. But what we're doing so far is we're taking the password and making it go deeper in the stack at the bottom. But for a sophisticated hacker that know how your system works, they can force the least common path, which is the weakest path. If they can force an account recovery on you that require a password, and they know how to reset your password, they can still circumvent the security of the system. So ideally, the best way going forward is to actually not to use passwords. So how can we do that? We'll talk about it in a little bit as we go, but let me re-emphasize that part of the solutions on improving the security of passwords is to do multi-factor authentication with risk-based engine, where basically a relying party can act like an identity provider and look at the binding between the user and their device and coming into when they do authenticate. For good risk engines, and if they are designed properly with the proper security policies, they should perform the act of improving security without really hindering the user. Good risk-based authentication will put friction for hackers and be transparent to the end user. And there is a lot of companies that do that, and it become an experience. You know, a lot of this can be used, can be based on AI today, where the risk engine is AI based and it's intelligent enough. And also you can mix with this solutions here, zero trust. Basically, you know, you treat every authentication or every request as a brand new authentication, and you can go and say, does this make sense or not? And if it does not, you can cause friction through step-up authentication. And the step-up authentication can be all kinds of things, from eliminating if you are a bot, or basically if you are a legitimate user or not. So you can offer an OTP or any other authentication challenges to make sure that the user is the right user. So now we go into what's passwordless. We've been talking about passwordless authentication, but we have not really defined it. And the reality is there isn't an industry definition of what passwordless authentication is. Part of our work within the question 10, the identity management question in the International Telecommunication Union, -T, is to define what passwordless authentication is. But the common consensus that we have, password authentication, it's not really just a switch that you set it and you either have passwordless or not. It is a goal, it's an objective, it's a design, it's a roadmap to get it. And enterprises need to work on it to make it, to achieve that passwordless, because you have multiple ways of dealing with customers and different authentication systems. Some of them are legacy, and the capability is not the same for every application or for every user device. So you need to achieve passwordless authentication as opposed to just, you know, say I do install one product and I have it. So it is a work in progress. So what passwordless should do? It's basically you should not use a password. That's easier said than done. What does it mean? What it means is you should replace it by some approach to achieve authentication. One approach is to identify the user, so you should have some form of an identifier. And also you should have some form of a trust anchor that when are using it to authenticate the user. So in some cases, you could register a phone to be your trust anchor for passwordless authentication. And then once this combination has happened, the actual authentication step should be made or rely on public key, on PKI. So basically a lot of what FIDO does, PKI, public-private key pairs. If you afford to do that and you do this, you can just get users to log on to you through an identifier and the proper PKI. And this, if it's done correctly with the proper governance system, you could do it where you could use trust models to have trust anchors and rely on securing all of your logons through the proper trusted devices. So in some cases, you will use MFA with passwordless authentication, but the objective here is not a supplement like what it has been used before on top of a password. The MFA is more of a confidence, that's a binding between you as a user and the device to enhance the trust that it is you that are logging on without the password. So MFA is used, but with the scope of MFA is not the same. And again, to do this properly, you should have some form of a risk engine on the background, so you can do the proper stepping up or not and put the risk associated with the cost of the transaction and its value. So if there is a breach, you can detect it. Okay, so a lot of the solutions for passwordless authentication today rely on the use of QR codes are becoming very convenient, especially in the pandemic, because everything is touchless and the QR code is gained momentum. However, there are a lot of security issues with the QR on its own, and we recognize that this on its own, without having a proper industry standard saying the do and don't for how to use a QR code, it will lead to complications. So in Oasis, there was a secure transaction TC, the ESAT TC. They have done a new specification called Secure QR Code Authentication at its version 1. It is in CD status, and it should go toward specification. So if you go onto the ESAT TC, the review period is still up and running. There is still time for you to provide feedback on that work. But the idea here is you can bootstrap a FIDO authentication or a passwordless authentication using a QR code. And if it is the case, whoever implementing QR code authentication need to make sure that they can detect man-in-the-middle attacks or prevent it. Okay, nothing can do that as good as a FIDO type solution because it is built into the FIDO protocol. But we could come, much better if we know what to look for and design the QR code interaction in a secure manner. So going with passwordless, the initial introduction of FIDO in mobile really did provide what we're talking about in terms of passwordless. So although you could jumpstart the process by entering a password on a mobile device, the support for FIDO on mobile devices gave you multi-factor authentication without having more than one device. The fact that the device is enrolled and recognized, and also the fact that there's a FIDO key on it, and also you can challenge the user to authenticate, which means that it is not a bot, it is basically a human being on the other end. And that FIDO have very nice characteristics in terms of protecting the authenticity of authentication. And here, meaning no biometric data leave the device, all of your biometric information is on the same device. It's local authenticator that open the vault toward the private public key pair infrastructure that enable that device to authenticate to the FIDO server in a secure manner. And it's not susceptible to man-in-the-middle and replay attack. And the protocol is open and available for everybody and it's certified and attested for. So you have a lot of confidence into that infrastructure, which at some point was desirable for PCs, but they were not available in PCs because of the lack of the proper API support for the browser, which the FIDO Alliance did recognize that, and they worked with W3C, and they expanded the encryption APIs to enable the support of the FIDO within a browser. And as I said before, this could work with on PCs that are have the capability to do platform authentication, meaning the proper secure enclaves on the PC, and for those that do not enable or have that ability, FIDO offer you through the CTAP family of authenticator the ability to use a third or a connected device to act as your platform. But the WebAuthn enable fully passwordless authentication through like what we have described before. So another option to go passwordless is to use push to mobile. And so basically, if you have a device that's enrolled and FIDO capable, you already have a FIDO credential on that device. This device can be your trust anchor, and it can be used to you can use it as a user to authenticate yourself to the relying party, meaning you can say okay or no to a transaction. So for this to work, push to mobile, it needs to be designed properly, because if it's designed wrongly, it's open to man-in-the-middle attack. So the best way to do it is if we can use push to mobile for those use cases that are user-initiated transaction. If it is user-initiated and we know it is the user, and we want to get the user agreement on getting the session to be up and running, so we can send a push notification. So the risk engine will help there, and that design needs to be done properly. Push to mobile should be used in like controlled environments where you should have a proper security policy and risk engine to ensure that you solve and detect man-in-the-middle attacks. Okay, so far we spoke about strong authentication and how we can go passwordless. However, a lot of the issues that we have in online commerce and online transactions and interactions, it's the identity. The identity token is still missing. FIDO does its best in solving the authentication by making authentication strong. And it solves a lot of the problems with and threats and vulnerabilities on an authentication token. But account recovery and it requires a binding of a FIDO token with an identity token, and FIDO is getting like now at a stage where they can start looking and examining how we can solve those issues and contribute to it. And in order to do that, there are current study groups and work looking at the various angles of properly doing the identity vetting to solve the account recovery problem. We had that at some point with the identity working group that looked into documentation and put actually a consistent framework of determining of what constitutes a valid document or a breeder document to do the identity validation. So that was part of the working group, and it has been ongoing for some time now. There are other works being done at the Alliance, and a lot of it is looking to see in terms of what's happening in the industry, in terms of the movement toward addressing the identity layer. And there are some work here that being happening, like a lot of revolution now and evolution coming. We have strong directions into using identity wallets. Your digital wallet is becoming part of your devices, of your mobile devices. The use of QR code to do financial transaction is getting mainstream too. OpenID as a protocol, it's adding support for verifiable credential and also for decentralized identifiers. And all of this started as part of the self-sovereign movement, which is basically how can we support and use decentralization to start giving users the ability to control their identity and also to attest and validate their identity. And at the end of the day, if a user needs to do business, the user needs to be part of the transaction. And originally, the way the passwords were done, the user business could be done without the involvement of the user. Transaction can happen through a password without the user being aware. But now we are going where the user is part of the transaction. And this is the best way to protect the ecosystem. So another association that we have been involved in, it's called the Accountable Digital Identity Association, and it's in it, it wants to put a trust and integrity into the digital identity layer. And they do that through some basic concepts. Basically, in it, the personal data is owned by the user. It's not owned by anybody. In particular, when it comes to governance and a trust ecosystem, the issuers that issue identity credentials, they should be done in a way that are trustworthy and also accredited and validated. And the issuer, should be part of the value chain. So how you do that? It should be through encouraging them to be an issuer. And so there should any ecosystem that enable trusted issuers to be part of it and compensated for, it will gain momentum because there is value proposition for the issuers and the consumers of a credential. This could be done in a way that the credential is being used while protecting the identity and the usage of the user, but compensating the issuer. So it can be done through triple blind type technologies. And this is what ADIA does work for or aims for. Okay, the consent layer should be, it's a contractual, the user consent for a transaction, but also it's replicate. Using user data is a two-way thing. It's not just a one-way thing. It's not just the user giving the right, but also the relying party should say, this is what I'm going to do with it and be accountable for it. So the data disclosure and should be accountable for. There should be value proposition for the issuers and the users to make this a value centric, what has a value, and then it should be used and available for everybody. So, if you have good device or mobile device with a lot of capabilities, that's good, but some people don't. And we should have the ability to have online and offline interaction and also support for cheap cards where you can have identity information or your credential that you can just scan with an NFC device that enable you to do business. And this should be done so we can be worldwide and globally capable of providing proper identity services. So within the ADI, we do initiation of identities. The identities are bootstrapped, and there is the digital identity service that provide anonymous services for relying party end users. But at the end of the day, it support multiple flavors of wallets. Okay, so you could have a cloud wallet, or you could have a version of your wallet on your device. And the idea here is replacing your verifiable credentials every time you move your device, it becomes problematic. So you should be able to still do your business and prove your identity in a way that's strong and reliable, whether you have your device or not. And this could be done through a combination of a cloud wallet and static wallet on the device. For this to make sense, the interactions should be done where a lot of it is just API calls, where a line party to provide identity services should not need to re-engineer what its infrastructure is, and same with the issuer. So the integration is key. And all the protocols should be interoperable. Whatever you do within this interchange should work with all kinds of flavors from OpenID, OpenID Connect, and the Trust over IP infrastructure. So going forward, so we are like evolving. It's a good time if you are in big enterprises, and it's a good time if you really want to start addressing security issues with passwords. We have a lot of core infrastructure and capability that's already available for deployment to enable those enterprises, especially in healthcare, that want to go into passwordless. There is an identity layer that's being emerging to enable more PHI and PII-based type services, because you can have stronger authentication for the right entity, for the right reason to share data, and under what conditions to share the data. So this is coming as we go. FIDO is looking into better ways to address account recovery and underlying problem with it, which is the identity layer. So today we have two study groups that are in progress. One look at the digital wallet study group, and the other one is the identity next study group. And this two study groups working together. They want to find the proper way and proper abstraction to enable services based on a wallet that enable a trusted ecosystem. So it's time to get rid of the password, and you can come and join us. And thank you for your for attending this.